start by telling you that the US-EU relations are long-standing relations. It's not something new. There is a history behind us. And what I found there, believe me, although in the beginning I thought that I would swim in uncharted waters, I found very receptive and positive minds. Yes, understand, there are people there who are thinking differently. They're going to lead the United States back to the Monroe Doctrine of that time. But what is the outcome of this meeting? It is true that I met with the new administration, with Secretary Kelly, Giuliani, an old friend of mine when we were together mayors, respectively, of Athens and in New York. Between us, I met also Flynn. I had 1 hour discussion with him, but when I landed to Brussels, he was dismissed. I believe that as soon as the situation is stabilized in the United States, the dialogue between EU and US will start again from the point it was stopped before. You know, we have institutionalized the EU-US dialogue on many issues. Of course, security is on the top. The United States and the European Union are confronted with the same challenges and the same threats, whether we talk about terrorism, whether we talk about organized crime, even when we talk about migration, because both issues, migration and security, are not European, they are global. And the United States have accepted it. That's why the previous administration had taken initiative to convene, under the auspices of President Obama, an extraordinary summit in the United States. So, on security, we have to stick together. But what, in terms of security, will define our cooperation and our alliance is the concept of the common threat and the common enemy. That's where we are standing now. So the message is clear. We shall keep working on that together. And in June, here in Malta, we are going to have the very first high-level meeting between United States and the European Union to give a follow-up to this cooperation. So I'm not afraid of the future of the EU-US relation. On the contrary, I believe that from the moment we have interlocutors, first of all, as I said before, that they're very receptive and very positive, and on the fact that our policy is based on a like-minded, I would say, approach, this will inaugurate a new period in our relations. I said there is a history behind us. US and the European Union are strong allies for the last 60 years. So when we talk about the post-war period, it has been defined by that. But, and this is my last remark, this relation has to be based on equal terms. And the European Union, in terms of security, is not where it should be. What do I mean by saying that? Europe is not a federal system, and it will not become, at least during our times. So we do not express ourselves with one voice. And as far as security is concerned, we have forgotten that in the wake, in the aftermath of the Second World War, when wise people took the decision to create the European Union, one of the two first communities beyond the steel and coal community was the European defense community. Well, it was proposed, but it was never approved. So now we have launched, we have inaugurated a dialogue about the future of Europe. We should go back to what is the legacy of the ones who decide to create Europe, and it is the moment, I believe, to move forward in defense terms to create a more structural and institutional defense system in Europe. The United States should not be afraid of that. We complement each other. It is to the benefit of the United States to have a strong Europe politically and also from a defense point of view. So when we reach that level, then our dialogue will take place on equal terms. This is my point on security. As far as the rest issues are concerned, we shouldn't forget cyber war, the hybrid warfare. Vladimir will have to tell us a lot about it, because it was firstly implemented by Putin's administration, and we see that in Ukraine, we see that in other parts of the world. And right now, Europe is not as well prepared for that, to address this issue. The European Commission has taken the lead right now. We are in front of a new effort to create the so-called security union. It's a project in order to put together different approaches by all member states. So what Antonio said before, it is the core of that. Strength in our unity, but unity not in rhetoric terms, but in practical and political terms. So this is the only way to safeguard the European project and move forward in these very challenging times we are all confronted with. And very correctly before, Antonio gave us the larger picture. When we talk about EU-US relations, we shouldn't ignore what is happening in the rest of the world. We shouldn't ignore the fact that there is a trend from some to create the second pillar of a new Cold War era that might be inaugurated in the future. We talk about Eurasia, for instance. What is this Eurasia? And where is Europe standing now, there? And what is the role of Europe within this global, very questioned situation that has started some years ago? So that's why we say now Europe should stick together. We must leave aside what has divided us in the past within the European system and start thinking and acting in a common way, in a more European way. Well, I heard many people asking the same question recently. Who is our interlocutor from the other side? We shouldn't ignore that when we refer to the United States, we refer to a very deep institutional system. We shouldn't make the mistake to identify necessarily the United States or Russia with the leaders that are there today. I believe that very soon, if it hasn't happened already, Mr. Trump will go closer to where he will feel safer, to the establishment. So we have an interlocutor. And whenever I listen to this question, Roberta, by many people, I can tell you, it is as if we Europeans, we want to evade the reality. We have our institutions. Our institutions are very, very weak because of the fact that the European Union is fragmented at all levels, whether we have to address our relations with the United States, security issues, defense issues, or even migration. I can tell you that I have been living very difficult moments, and we have shared some of them together in the European Parliament, where you have been very supportive to our efforts to consolidate the European policy. We are far away from that. So the problem is where the question will be asked to our American friends, who is your interlocutor in Europe? So we have to harmonize our relations and leave the two systems to talk to each other, as we did in the beginning, in the wake of the elections after my visit to the United States. I came back with very positive signals, and I shared it within the college, but also with member states. So the problem right now, and this debate is of great importance, because it comes at a moment that Europe is at a very existential moment. One of the greatest leaders of Europe is here, Mr. Santer. If he could say some words of how Europe was during his days, at that time, Europe had more unity, Mr. President. It's not the case today, and President Juncker is doing a lot right now to convince everybody to start thinking and acting in the same way. I come back from Poland and Hungary. I can share you some of my experiences there. I have found very reasonable interlocutors within Europe, but also some people who want to revert Europe to its dark past of its history. And this is our problem right now. And this Commission has a role to play, because in the future we have to answer the question, how do we want to be remembered? History remembers two types of leaders, the ones who have destroyed and the ones who have made. Where do we want to belong? And we must not leave this great project, unique in mankind's history, to vanish, because some people have started forgetting. This is the problem. How did we start and where are we standing now? now. And in the meantime, a lot of things have changed in the world. So coming back to your last point, you have said, and the thing you said also, and it has been said repeatedly, that Mr. Trump is a businessman. And I say, yes, that's why he will prove himself very pragmatic very soon. This is the difference between businessmen and politicians. The problem is when politicians are becoming businessmen. Thank you.
The question I would like to put to the Commissioner is, he referred to the EDC. If you think of the whole European process, the project as a plant, some things grew on to fruition. The EDC, the defense component, was a stalk that was broken in the 50s. It wasn't completely cut off, but it was certainly snapped. It may now be showing shoots. If that is to happen, what would the Commissioner say about the dangers of unnecessary and undesirable competition with NATO?
First of all, as I said before, we are in an existential moment, and we must see what we can do in order to safeguard the European project. I referred to the beginning because, although it sounds a paradox or an oxymoron, the answer about the future of Europe lies on its past. To remember what happened at that time and why all these wise leaders around the table decided to create the European Union. And it was not by coincidence that they had proposed in the wake of this tragic war of 2 world wars to emancipate this new union politically in terms of defense and even of foreign policy, which is not the case. As far as your point, whether a European defense community might be a rival to NATO, sorry, I don't agree with you. It is exactly the opposite. Because, first of all, it was said before, European Union is an economic global superpower. Nobody denies it. That's why everybody wants to come here. So, but on the other hand, if the Union is not politically emancipated, and this is the answer to the question, where is Europe heading towards? By coming back to the past, revive all these ideas of that time, and immediately create a structure in terms of defense and adopt a common foreign policy. It was said before. We should speak in one voice. Ken said it. That's what also the Americans want from us, in order to have relations on equal terms. So, defense, foreign policy, economic strength, all together is what they would make Europe a real global stakeholder. We complement each other. Why? Because the American democracy, I don't use the term United States, American democracy, and the European democracy are based on the same values and principles. So today we are confronted with the same threats and the same challenges, and this is what can foster common consciences. But institutionally, we have to talk to each other in order at least to have interlocutors from both sides. In the Commission, we have taken the decision to move forward in enhancing the European defense industry. That's the very first step. Is it enough? It's only to produce armaments? Of course not. We must have the political umbrella on that. That's why we must move forward. And the answer to the question, where is Europe moving towards right now, under these very difficult moments, is to do more for Europe. And I personally, this is my personal point of view, on the well-known white paper presented some days ago by President Juncker. We must also have our personal point of view on that. I believe immediately we must move forward in adopting common policies in the field of defense, of foreign policy, of economy, of social issues, and of security, all along with migration. The rest can be within the responsibilities of member states, because we are far away from becoming a federal system. We're not like United States, Canada, or Australia. We have behind us history, traditions, national identity. We cannot ignore that. And this is the answer to the ones who are undermining Europe. Because I come to your point, because the real threat of Europe is the rising of populism and nationalism. And let me make a definition here, because the situation is a bit confusing. What's the difference between nationalism and patriotism? In patriotism, you love your country, which is your duty. In nationalism, you hate the country of the other. And you see what's happening right now in the Balkans. Balkans are risking to get re-Balkanized. And we all remember what happened just 1 century ago there. So the problem is bigger. In order to enhance and consolidate Europe, we have to adopt genuinely European answers to that. So what I said is a proposal, and this does not constitute a problem for the United States. And believe me, when the moment comes, you will see that the very first ones to salute such an event will be the United States. And NATO has a role to play. The only problem from NATO right now is that it is not in a position to be defined in terms of a common enemy, because it is an alliance. And alliance from the ancient times till now is determined by who is against you. Otherwise, it's not an alliance. It is friendship, a cooperation, whatever it can be. So I'm not afraid of that. On the contrary, I would fight for that. I said before, the answer is obvious. Europe has to prove itself as a global stakeholder at all levels. That was the strategic goal from the very beginning of the creation of the European Union. Some have pulled brakes in the meantime. Now, in front of the situation, we have to do more moving forward. As far as your remarks are concerned, I have been in your country for reasons you know. Well, believe me, the message comes also from these countries. I haven't seen in my life so many European flags in the streets and on the buildings of Georgia and of Ukraine as much there. Less than you see in Brussels. Why? Because you can explain it. You are thirsty of democracy, liberty, rule of law. It's what you didn't live for so many years. So we, the rest of Europeans, were enjoying all these values. We should take also a message from your countries. Why do you want to become members of the European Union, although you say that Europe is weak today? But Europe is not weak. Europe is very, very strong. So this is very clear what I want to say. Europe can really prove itself as one of the leaders in the world. And what is leading Europe are all these noble and supreme values that were born in Europe. And they have been sustained for 70 years. And we here, we are the unique generation in mankind's history that we have not lived a war. Our forefathers were sleeping with a revolver under their pillow. So don't forget that, because I always say, this is my motto, I say I'm not a Marxist, but I will quote Marx today. He said that history repeats itself. No, men repeat history because very simply they don't read it.
Thank you very much.
Please whisper in the ears of Mr. Trump to exorcise and abjure as soon as possible the populists and the nationalists in Europe, because the night of his elections they celebrated, and it doesn't match with the great values of the American democracy. And the United States should not be co-responsible for the rising of this phenomenon in Europe.